So my last project that I made was this tomahawk out of a piece of 5160 spring steel. I like that metal. It's very hard, it's very tough, easy to work with. You get a good edge out of it, and it holds the edge. With the leftover piece from this tomahawk, there's just a little chunk of steel. Well, what I want to do is actually welded a piece onto the back of this. I want to put this in the forge and see how far I can draw this out. If you look at the width of this, if the blade is this, oh, it's still hot. If the blade is that wide, I should be able to draw this out to about here, which would be, you know, and then the normal thickness of a knife, 3/16 inch, and then I should be able to make something from that. So how this is going to get done is with this straight peen hammer. Straight peen means the metal is going to go this way, parallel to the workpiece. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat this up, and just a series of hits, it's going to smash it down. It's not going to allow it to move perpendicular, it's only going to allow it to move parallel, and we're going to try to draw this out. This being a cross peen hammer, if I want to move metal this way, then I can, if I just want to move metal this way, I would hit the hammer. I have a video out on this. Then you can use the flat, that would move metal in both directions. So I have two types of furnaces. This is a LP gas forge that I put together, furnace, whatever you want to call it, for heating metal, for blacksmithing, and also for melting. The other one is a coal forge. This would have been one used in an old farm or something. These are still pretty popular. So I have a couple of these. So as you crank the handle, you see that would be a manual way of doing it. Alright, we'll see if this is hot enough. Probably not. See the marks this way, means it's moving that way. Color to it. So a couple things to consider. Get on both sides. That tries to eliminate any warps. Try to straighten the metal when you're done with it. ended up on the first heat. Remember that piece was about, where's my hand? Piece was about this big. So we've already doubled in size, and we've already cut it in half, at least width-wise. So it's half the width, other than this piece at the end here. This piece is still thicker. And I'll go ahead and remove this. This is going to be the blade portion. This is going to be the handle. This will be a little different. I'm going to try starting with the handle. That way I know, I always end up either having too much or too little. This time I'm going to start with the handle. Maybe push this down, push that back out, and then flatten that down. It doesn't have to be this thick. I mean, this is it'd be like a neck knife, so it doesn't need to be too thick. Anyway, that's where it started out, first one. I'll keep up to date on the other ones, the other heats as they go forward. Alright, so now that we have the rough shape of the knife, this is going to be the handle. I still got to figure out what I want to do here, whether I want to, I may just bring this down, but we're not going to use the gas furnace at this point, not the big gas furnace. We're going to use this 2 brick, really it's just a 1 brick. We're going to put in with the propane, and the propane from here is going to be enough for me to finish this blade. Again, with this setup, we have a propane. This isn't MAP or anything, this is just propane. The blade is inserted in. Inside there is going to get nice and cherry red. I'm not going to use as much fuel, not going to waste as much fuel, which is the reason I like it, and I'll be able to get a good heat out of it. Right, so here you can see the metal probably not as good without the sun, maybe you can see that. I'm just going to go ahead and keep working in that pommel. We're going to stretch the metal this way. You can see the impressions in it, but it's all getting the same uniform thickness. Work it back a little bit. Make sure you straighten it. Get a nice flat edge on there. Straight edge, and we'll put it back in for another heat. Okay, at this point, this is just about where I want it to be. It's the right thickness, it's the right width, I can work with that. Again, I'm probably just going to wrap that with paracord. So I broke the end off here. I'm going to grind off this little nib because I'm not exactly sure what that steel is. I know from here back is 5160. So I'm going to grind that off, and then I'm going to just use the vice grips and put it in this way and start working on the blade. Alright, here we are on the other side of the blade. Let me get this in the shade so you can see the heat. Again, we're just trying to move metal this way. That's why we're using a straight peen hammer. Flip from side to side to keep it even. We have probably 1/4 inch we need to move. You can see very thin, very thick, so we'll end up tapering this whole thing out. Straighten out when we're done. We'll put it back in the fire. So I try to end each heat each day with what I've completed. So here's the blade. Again, I think it's a pretty uniform thickness, probably a little thinner in the back if you can see that. This I'll put on a belt sander. I'm going to try to make a uniform blade. Fortunately, when I start these things, I really don't have much in mind other than making a blade, but we're going to go ahead and put a little kerf in here for the handle. I'm not sure whether I want this to be wood yet or paracord. I cut this out a little bit more. Very nice to have those the grinders, the angle grinders, make things so much easier. And there'll be a draw point. I like the draw points. A draw point you can carry with you. A stiletto type blade you cannot. So as EMS, I like to have something like this that complies with the laws. Very, very sharp edge here. I may put 3 or 4, maybe 5 or 6 cuts in here to try to make that for cutting seat belts and things like that. The rest of this will be beveled probably back to here. So it's going to be a high bevel knife, very sharp. We're going to go ahead and grind all that stuff in. But again, you know, from a little chunk of steel, probably 1.25 inches back to this. If you remember what I was talking about, you know, the can't create nor destroy, you can transfer. So this is maybe 1/4 the thickness, so 1, 2, 3, you know, and some change and things. So this is what the blade looks like, very roughly. I'm going to go ahead and finish the blade. I'll start grinding. I'll start, there's some uneven spots here. You know, again, it's difficult to get this thing to be flat, straight, and true, but I think it's pretty flat, pretty square. We're going to start sanding everything, trying to get the edges in. We're going to go ahead and grind the bevels in instead of heating those. I may actually heat this up a little bit to try to make this a little bit bigger. But there's the beginning of the blade. Whenever I get closer to it, I'll continue the video. All right, so there's the rough grind on the belt sander. Let me kind of square it up. Everything's true, nice and flat, nice and square. Nothing's warped. I think what we're going to do now with these, I'm going to put it back in the furnace. We're going to heat that up, and we're going to attempt to do some beveling here to try to get a more of a forged edge instead of a ground edge. I mean, I know there was some forging done here, but I guess that's the next step. We're going to try to draw this out. May have to straighten it. We had to grind it a little bit off here. We'll probably forge this down a little bit on the corner of the anvil. And by that I mean we're just going to lay it here on the anvil. We're going to hit it with a hammer. Same thing with here. We're going to either do it this way, do it this way. So hopefully this thing doesn't warp. If it warps, we'll straighten it out again. But that's the basis of the blade. We'll do a little more work, and then we'll show what happens when it's done. So where we left off was the rough forging is done. I got 2 holes drilled in the back. Blade's relatively straight. You can see that maybe against the... Started just putting the grind lines in, so the rest of this is going to be grinding. Maybe do some heat treating on it. Again, that's a process of tempering and strain relieving. So we'll throw it in the forge, get cherry red, and dip it in motor oil that's warm. But that's pretty much it. We'll get a handle for it. So if I can get more progress here, I'll update everything. Alright, so the next phase is going to be the heat treating phase. What we're going to do is we're going to heat this blade up past cherry red. You can actually see the tip of that is red. We're going to heat the entire thing up red hot, and then we're going to dip it in this to use motor oil. So there's the blade. Again, what we're trying to do is get this as red hot as possible. We're trying to actually change states to where it's non-magnetic. I didn't do the magnet test on this. Again, it's just a play blade. But I will let it cool down a little bit. We'll do the magnet test on it, and then when we're done with that, I'm going to polish it a little bit, get some of the scale off of it, and then I'll take it over to the oven, and we're going to anneal it or strain relieve it, because what you're doing is almost like throwing hot metal into ice. It just really contracts and restricts and makes the metal very, very hard, but also makes it very brittle, and I don't want this to break, so we're going to strain relieve this. Alright, next thing we're going to do is the file test. So you take a file, and that really just skips over the blade. The back, not as hard. I wanted this to be hard, this not so much to be hard. I don't really need this to be a flint striker. We take a regular piece of steel that's not been hardened. You can see how that doesn't, you know, it shines the metal up and it really sticks and it's taking metal out. With this tip, it's really just kind of skirting right off of there. Alright, so the blade, I've actually taken a sanding disc and sanded most of this. I'll leave this on here for a little bit. But I've gone ahead and sanded this, and now when I throw this in the oven, when I pull it out, I'll put it in about 400 degrees for maybe an hour or so. When I'm done with this, this whole thing will be a straw blue, and then I'll know that's tempered enough. Again, some people, I see them heat the entire blade up, you know, it's just as red as they can get it, again changing phases, and then dip it in the oil, and that hardens the entire blade. This is a little thinner knife for me, so I want to make sure that this area has a little more, it's not going to be as brittle as what a file would be. So this is going to have a little bit more give, and even the spine back here is going to have a little bit more give. So this knife is one where you should be able to put it in a vise and actually bend it a little bit, so it's not going to be as hard as what a file is. Again, this is really this point and this point. Those are really the two that need to be hard on this part. You know, tough on this part. So this whole process of blacksmithing to me is a journey. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've thrown a lot of things out to try to repurpose them. One of the things I used to do is I would get my knife to be perfectly done while it had the no temper in it. It was a lot easier to work. And then when I would go ahead and I would heat treat it, it would have all kind of scale, and I would lose my finish and I would lose the edge. So I really don't do that. I get about 80% complete, 90% complete. I heat treat it, and you can see there's a lot of scratches in here. I'm going to sand and buff all those scratches out. Then I'll go ahead and start polishing everything, put the edge on it, put the handle on it. Alright, so here's the blade. This has been cooling for a little bit. I had it in at 450 for about an hour. You can see the bluish color. It's like a straw blue is the color that they call that. I don't think that's going to wipe off. I may polish that off. It's not a bad finish. Again, what this does is it strain relieves it. So when you take the red hot metal, dip it in the oil, that just really contracts all the molecules in it. So basically pulls everything together. This will do a strain relief, kind of aligns them a little bit. So you still have the hardness, but it's not as brittle as what it was. So again, well, this time I jumped ahead. What I did is cut some black walnut. I save branches of trees. When I go up to the park, I'll look at the pieces of wood. So here's actually it's English walnut. I think that's English walnut. That's been drying for about a year. I cast a couple pins. I meant to video putting the pins in and JB welding it, gluing the handle on. Of course I didn't. I got real motivated, so I wanted to cut them off there. You can see have to do a little bit more work there. But that's pretty much what the blade's going to look like. Then it's just a matter of polishing. We'll hit this with some 100 to 200 grit, and we'll start doing the sharpening down at the bottom. Again, from what it was, from just this little chunk of steel, little chunk of 5160 to I don't know. This is something I would give to somebody. This is a good carry knife. Again, I just tested this with the file. Very, very hard. It just skips across. The spine, that's a little bit not as hard. So I would imagine this blade, to me this is a thin blade, so there'll be some flexibility. This would be a good utility knife. So any questions, post them. If not, thanks for watching.